What if the person living right next door, the quiet classmate you tried to befriend out of kindness, was secretly watching you through your window? Recording you. Waiting. In June 2011, that nightmare became reality for 27-year-old Lauren Giddings, a brilliant law school graduate with her whole future ahead of her. She vanished from her Macon, Georgia apartment just days after celebrating with friends, her body dismembered and hidden in a trash bin mere steps from her front door. For 4 agonizing days, her family searched desperately for answers. Police found a blood-soaked bathroom but no body. Friends discovered her car, her purse, her phone, all left behind. It made no sense. Then investigators made a discovery that would crack this cold case wide open. The evidence pointed to someone Lauren had known for 3 years, someone she sat next to in law school, someone she'd gone out of her way to be kind to, a neighbor who had been hiding a dark obsession behind his awkward smile. This is the story of how one woman's compassion was repaid with unthinkable evil, and how a series of stolen condoms would lead police straight to a killer, an arrest that would shock the entire community and expose just how dangerous the person next door can truly be. Let me introduce you to Lauren Teresa Giddings, born April 18, 1984 in Tacoma Park, Maryland. Lauren was the firstborn daughter of Bill and Karen Giddings, a loving couple who had gone straight from high school to work and were overjoyed to see their eldest child pursue higher education. Lauren grew up on 20 acres of dormant farmland in Howard County, Maryland, in a house shaded by oaks and pines. This was a home filled with animals, dogs and rabbits, peacocks and goats, turkeys and chinchillas. Lauren grew up loving bluegrass music and steel guitar, and she would always be a country girl at heart, standing nearly 6 feet tall with golden blonde hair. Lauren was strikingly beautiful, but her looks were just the surface. Those who knew her described someone with an uncommon spirit, someone genuinely kind and compassionate. From kindergarten through 8th grade at St. Mary of the Mills Catholic School, Lauren was deeply moved by church teachings, by the qualities of compassion and charity that would define her entire life. Her best friend Lori Supsick remembers her this way. Oh, how amazing she was. She would be friends with anyone. People who maybe others made fun of in school, Lauren would be friends with them, and not necessarily because she felt sorry for them, but because she saw the good in every person. This virtue, this remarkable ability to see good in everyone, would ultimately contribute to her death. Lauren excelled at Columbia's Atholton High School, playing softball and field hockey. Graduating in 2002, she had hoped to become a doctor initially. She was confident, driven, passionate about learning. Her mother Karen remembers touring more than 24 college campuses together. I loved every minute of it, Karen recalled, to see her following her dream. That dream took her to Agnes Scott College near Atlanta, a small liberal arts school for women. But it was there that Lauren discovered medicine wasn't her calling. She called her mother one day, her voice uncertain. "I'm having a hard time with chemistry. I don't know if this is right for me." I think she felt she was letting me down, Karen remembers. And I told her, "Lauren, don't worry about it. If this isn't for you, do what makes you happy." And I could just feel the relief in her. Lauren found her own path. After earning her political science degree from Agnes Scott, she worked for a year at the National Center for Public Policy Research, a conservative think tank, before interning at the prestigious Atlanta law firm King & Spalding. It was there, during that internship, that she met David Vandiver, an attorney 20 years her senior. They began a long-distance relationship that would endure through law school. In August 2008, Lauren entered Mercer University's Walter F. George School of Law in Macon, Georgia. She rented a 2-bedroom apartment for $575 a month at Barristers Hall, a small private complex that catered specifically to law students. The complex looked like a motel, Lauren joked, dubbing it La Quinta, but her mother thought it was adorable, with its wrought iron fence, striped awnings and azalea beds under spreading fruit trees. At Mercer, Lauren blossomed. She joined an offbeat running club called the Hash House Harriers. She attended Mass almost daily at St. Joseph Catholic Church, just a few blocks from her apartment. She organized monthly family dinners for her close circle of friends in the class of 2011, giving them much-needed respites from the law school grind. Her friends all laughed at her style. Rarely would Lauren go anywhere without her golden hair coiffed and her makeup just so. She'd doll herself up in a snazzy dress and heels, usually pink, and tote her one-eyed Pekingese poodle named Butterbean like a purse dog. She was a Hollywood character sprung to life. Elle Woods from Legally Blonde. Lauren loved that movie. Lauren became president of Mercer's Federalist Society chapter in her final academic year, a testament to her strong conservative principles and her ability to lead. One member describes her as gregarious, outgoing, the public face of the organization. She was articulate, personable, self-assured. and she was determined to use her law degree to help the most vulnerable. It surprised no one who knew Lauren well that she wanted to become a public defender, to devote her career to the poorest of the accused. As one friend put it, her smile would light up a room. On May 14, 2011, Lauren graduated from Mercer Law School. 2 nights before graduation, her family celebrated at the Hummingbird Stage and Tap Room in downtown Macon. The bar was packed with joyful classmates. Lauren had every reason to be excited. She was preparing to take the Georgia bar exam in late July. She planned to move to Atlanta afterward, find a job, start her life with David. Wedding plans were already being discussed. Her little sister Caitlin was getting married that June in Maryland, and Lauren was thrilled to be part of the celebration. Everything was falling into place for Lauren Teresa Giddings. Everything except the person living in the apartment right next door, someone who had been watching her far more closely than anyone realized. The last week of June 2011 should have been a time of joy and anticipation for Lauren Giddings. Her lease at Barristers Hall was due to expire on July 1st. She'd been back and forth to Maryland, attending her sister Caitlin's wedding, celebrating with family. Now she was back in Macon for one final push. The Georgia bar exam was scheduled for late July, and Lauren was determined to pass. She told friends and family she would be going off the grid for several days to study intensively, no distractions, just her books, and her determination. On Friday night, June 24th, Lauren went out with friends. 2 of her classmates, both acoustic guitarists, were performing in bars downtown. She and her pals hit the Rookery first, listened for a while, then crossed the street to Bottoms Up. The evening was a welcome breather after weeks of intensive study. As she occasionally would do after a night on the town, she slept at a friend's place Friday night. On Saturday, June 25th, Lauren used her boyfriend David's country club privileges to spend the day by the pool. She wanted to swim and relax before diving back into studying. About 6:30 that evening, as she was headed back to Barristers Hall, alone in her 2004 Mitsubishi Galant, she stopped for fast food at a drive-up window monitored by an overhead camera. The wrappers and receipt would later be found in her car. Maybe she ate before she got home. Then, in her apartment, about 10:30 that Saturday night, June 25th, Lauren sat at her computer for the last time. She typed an email to David, who was in California that weekend. She told him how much she had enjoyed Mercer and how wonderful Macon had been. Just in passing, without specifics, she mentioned that she thought someone had tried to break into her apartment recently. Hoodlums, she surmised, not dwelling on it. She told David she was happy. She told him how excited she was about the future, wherever it might take her. And she was never heard from again. The apartment Lauren lived in was on the 2nd floor of the building closer to Georgia Avenue. There were only 2 apartments on that upper level, sharing a common balcony and an outdoor staircase in the center. Lauren's neighbor in that other apartment was a fellow Mercer Law graduate named Stephen McDaniel. At some point in the early morning hours of June 26th, while Lauren slept, Stephen McDaniel used a master key he had stolen to silently enter her apartment. He made his way to her bedroom, and when Lauren woke and recognized him, he strangled her to death with his bare hands. But this was just the beginning of the horror. After killing Lauren, MC Daniel methodically cleaned her bathroom, using luminol, would later reveal massive amounts of blood that had been scrubbed away. He dismembered her body with a hacksaw he had purchased days earlier. He wrapped her torso in plastic bags and placed it in a rollaway trash bin just below the balcony they shared. Her head, her arms, her legs, all 6 pieces. To this day, they have never been found. For 4 days, Stephen McDaniel went about his business, as if nothing had happened. He attended gatherings. He spoke with Lauren's friends who were starting to worry about her. He even gave interviews to news reporters, all while knowing exactly where Lauren was. All while her family desperately searched for answers. 4 nights after Lauren was last seen, on Wednesday, June 29th, Katie O'Hare, one of Lauren's best friends since childhood, was the first to grow concerned. She had sent a text message to Lauren about eye makeup, and Lauren hadn't responded, which wasn't like her. Then Katie called Lauren's phone, and it was off. Katie messaged Lauren's sister Caitlin, asking if she had talked with Lauren lately. Caitlin, 24 years old and newly married, immediately got that feeling that something was wrong, and it blew up from there. Phone calls and text messages, emails, and Facebook posts. Anyone know where Lauren is? What made this even more alarming was that Lauren had just sent Caitlin honeymoon photos. But Caitlin noticed something chilling. Lauren hadn't even opened them. That was completely out of character. Lauren always responded. She always stayed in touch. Suddenly, everyone who had tried to contact Lauren that week learned that no one else could reach her either. From Chicago, where she works in advertising, Lori Supsick reported Lauren missing to Macon police late Wednesday night. An officer swung by Barristers Hall and checked Lauren's door. It was locked. Nothing seemed amiss. Then a group of Lauren's law school friends hurried to the apartment. They knew Lauren kept a spare key hidden in a candle jar on the balcony. They retrieved it and went inside. Emerging from his apartment next door, Stephen McDaniel followed them in, looking distraught and perplexed, just like the others, playing the concerned neighbor, the worried classmate. What they found inside made no sense. There were no signs of a struggle. But Lauren's keys were there, her purse was there, her cell phone was there. The apartment was messy with bags and boxes for her planned move. But Lauren herself, gone. Her 2004 Mitsubishi Galant was still in the parking lot. She hadn't driven anywhere. Where could she have gone without her car, her keys, her purse, her phone? It defied logic. The friends called the police back. This time, officers came to investigate more thoroughly, and that's when the case took a dark turn. Thursday morning, June 30th, 2011. Macon Police Chief Mike Burns, a 37-year veteran with a department of 300 officers, arrived at Barristers Hall personally. This was just the fourth homicide case of the year in the city of 91,000 residents. Macon called itself the heart of Georgia, and this law student complex in the safe pretty Coleman Hill neighborhood was the last place anyone expected something like this. Officers began a systematic search of the complex and the surrounding area. They were looking for Lauren Giddings, hoping to find her safe somewhere. But they were also preparing for the worst. About 9:40 that Thursday morning, a crime scene investigator was following his instincts, checking the trash bins near Barristers Hall. And then he caught it. The smell, the unmistakable smell of decomposition. He opened a rollaway, flip-top rubbish bin just below Lauren's balcony. Inside, wrapped in plastic bags, was a woman's torso. Just a torso. No head, no arms, no legs. The investigator had found it just minutes before the trash haulers would have arrived to take it all to a landfill. Minutes. That's how close this evidence came to being lost forever. Chief Burns was there. He saw it and felt his throat tighten. Later, he would reflect on that moment. You think that could be your daughter, that they did that too? And he began to wonder, what right words are there to tell such news to a family? Back inside Lauren's apartment, detectives deployed luminol, a chemical that reveals trace amounts of blood even after it's been cleaned. The results were chilling. Lauren's bathtub lit up like a Christmas tree. Someone had scrubbed and scrubbed, trying to remove massive amounts of blood. But you can't hide everything from forensic science. The bathroom told a story. This was where Lauren had been dismembered. This was where someone had spent hours methodically cutting her apart, trying to dispose of the evidence. Police immediately shifted their focus from a missing person case to a homicide investigation, and they had one very obvious question. Who had access to Lauren's apartment? About 800 miles away, in Laurel, Maryland, Bill Giddings received the call every parent dreads. Lauren was missing. Human remains had been found. He needed to get to Macon immediately. Bill couldn't sit around waiting for a plane. At 8 in the morning, too frantic to think straight, he climbed into his Honda Pilot and started driving. 700 miles, through Virginia and the Carolinas and deep into Georgia. His heart raced. He fought back panic. His mind screamed, please, let them be wrong. He drove until after nightfall, reaching Macon about 9:30 Thursday night. His brother George and brother-in-law Perry Hoke, a D.C. patrol officer, had flown in to be with him. 3 other Giddings relatives from Georgia were there too. They crowded into the office of a police major at City Hall. The major, the police chief, the district attorney, and 2 detectives greeted Bill somberly, offering condolences. Bill could see the stress on their tired faces. He sat heavily on a couch in the first-floor office. He thought, where's her body? Where's Lauren? When will they take me to her? I thought I was there to identify her, Bill would say later. I just wanted to see her. But the officials kept hesitating, kept beating around the bush. For more than an hour, they inquired into Lauren's background, her habits, her relationships, who might have wanted to hurt her. Bill could think of no one. He told them what they would hear from many others, that Lauren had a generous spirit born of her devout Catholic faith, that she had been filled with kindness, that she had tried to find good in everyone. Chief Burns, who has a son Lauren's age and 3 adult daughters, knew what he had to do. He asked most of those present to leave the room. I wanted to talk to him father to father, Burns recalls. Burns leaned forward, his voice low and deliberate. You're going to be reading this in the newspaper, he told Bill. Sooner or later, it's going to come out. And father to father, I think you need to know from me first. Bill sat drained and dazed on the couch, a blank look on his face. Tell me. And when Chief Burns told him, when he explained that they had only found Lauren's torso, that she had been decapitated and dismembered, a single tear rolled down Bill Giddings' face. He got into more details about the decapitation and so forth. Bill remembers. The only thing they had was her torso. Everything else was missing. Back at Barristers Hall, detectives began canvassing every unit in the complex. They needed to speak with every resident, every neighbor, everyone who might have seen or heard something. They were asking for consent to search apartments, looking for any evidence that might point them toward a suspect. Every single tenant agreed to a search. Every single one, except for one person, the man who lived in the apartment right next door to Lauren Giddings. Stephen Mark McDaniel refused, and his behavior during those initial encounters with police was, to put it mildly, odd. He spoke in legalistic language, carefully choosing his words. He appeared nervous, agitated. Officers couldn't put their finger on it, but something about Stephen McDaniel just didn't sit right. Detectives pulled his background. MC Daniel was 25 years old, 6 feet tall and lean, with a billowing mane of curly brown hair. He had an undergraduate degree from Mercer's School of Business and Economics and had just graduated from Mercer Law School on May 14th, the same day as Lauren. He grew up near Atlanta. An aunt would later describe him to the Telegraph of Macon as one of the nicest, smartest people I've ever known, adding, "I've never heard him say a crossword." But at Mercer, McDaniel was regarded by most as an oddball. He made few friends. He was solitary, but not quite a recluse. While Lauren espoused strong conservative principles with warmth and charisma, McDaniel shared similar political views but expressed them with awkward diffidence. They had both joined Mercer's chapter of the Federalist Society in their first year of law school. In their final academic year, Lauren was president, and McDaniel was vice president. One member describes them as the yin and yang. Lauren was the vivacious, glowing public face of the organization. McDaniel was the shy, diligent backstage worker. Dependable as hell, the member recalls. If we needed a cooler full of ice, the cooler was full of ice. If we needed flyers put up, they got put up. But who knows what the awkward, diffident vice president thought when he looked at the beautiful president, so articulate, personable and self-assured. Who knows what feelings he kept to himself? Adoration, resentment, obsession? On graduation night, May 12, 2011, 2 nights before the ceremony, Lauren and her family celebrated at a packed bar. Karen Giddings glanced up and saw McDaniel. She pointed him out to Lauren. "Oh look, he showed up." Karen remembers her daughter saying. Lauren had suggested that McDaniel come. She was surprised to see him, but happy. He was standing in a corner throwing darts. Alone. That was Stephen McDaniel, always alone, always watching from the margins. And Lauren, being Lauren, had always tried to encourage him to get him out of his comfort zone. Because he never went out, Karen recalls. His windows were always drawn. Lauren's sister Caitlin remembers her saying, if anyone would joke around about him, say something about him being dangerous, then Lauren would nicely tell them, well, if he's dangerous, I'll be the only one who's safe. Because they did get along, and she was very nice to him. She really did trust him. That trust would prove fatal. Unlike a traditional cold case that goes dormant for years or decades, the Lauren Giddings investigation never had a chance to grow cold. But for several tense, agonizing days in early July 2011, detectives had only a torso, a blood-soaked bathroom, and a neighbor who refused to cooperate. The media descended on Macon like locusts. Reporters from local stations, national networks, cable news shows, they all wanted a piece of this story. A beautiful young law graduate, brutally murdered and dismembered in a quiet college town. It was tabloid gold. Lauren's family endured the agony of waiting for formal identification. DNA testing takes time. The remains needed to be processed, analyzed, confirmed. But in their hearts, they already knew. Bill and Karen Giddings, their daughters Caitlin and 18-year-old Sarah, all of them knew that Lauren was gone. In that short window between June 30th and July 1st, 2011, rumors swirled through Mercer's campus and the surrounding neighborhoods. Who could have done this? Was there a killer on the loose? Were other students in danger? Some speculated it might have been a random intruder, someone who broke in from the outside. Others whispered about jealous ex-boyfriends or stalkers, but detectives kept coming back to one simple fact. There was no sign of forced entry into Lauren's apartment. Whoever killed her either had a key or she let them in. And given the timing, late at night or early in the morning, it seemed unlikely Lauren would have opened her door to a stranger. On the morning of Thursday, June 30th, just hours after the torso was discovered, a reporter from a local television station was on scene at Barristers Hall. The journalist was approaching residents asking if they knew Lauren Giddings, if they had seen anything unusual, the standard question reporters ask in these situations. And there, standing in the parking lot, was Stephen McDaniel. The reporter approached him, and MC Daniel agreed to an interview on camera. What happened next would become one of the most infamous pieces of footage in true crime history. The reporter began asking MC Daniel about Lauren. Did he know her? McDaniel responded that yes, he lived next door to her. He spoke in a halting, stilted manner, choosing his words carefully. He seemed nervous, but cooperative, expressing concern about his missing neighbor. And then the reporter delivered the news. They had found a body, a torso actually, in a trash bin right there at the complex. The change in Stephen McDaniel was instantaneous and dramatic. His face went completely blank. His body became rigid, almost catatonic. For several seconds, he simply stared, unable or unwilling to respond. Then he began to hyperventilate. He asked to sit down. He physically withdrew, his body language screaming distress. The reporter asked if he was okay. McDaniel muttered something about the police not having told him. He claimed he didn't know. He looked like he was going to be sick. Later, when this footage was broadcast and then went viral online, language experts and armchair detectives would analyze every frame. Some believed McDaniel's reaction was genuine shock at learning his careful plan had been discovered. Others thought he was a terrible actor trying to feign surprise. But what was clear to the Macon Police Department was this: Stephen McDaniel's on-camera breakdown looked exactly like the reaction of a guilty man who just realized he had been caught. Still, having a suspicion and proving it are two very different things. Police needed evidence, hard, physical evidence that would stand up in court. And to get that evidence, they needed to search McDaniel's apartment. On Friday, July 1st, 2011, McDaniel was brought to the Macon Police Department for questioning. The interrogation would last for hours and would become another legendary piece of footage, studied by investigators and true crime enthusiasts worldwide. Detective David Patterson conducted the interview. McDaniel, speaking in the same halting, carefully measured way he had on camera, agreed to talk without a lawyer present. He denied any involvement in Lauren's disappearance. He claimed he barely knew her, despite living next door for nearly 3 years. But then, under patient, methodical questioning, McDaniel made several admissions that would change everything. He admitted that years earlier, he had illegally entered 2 other apartments at Barristers Hall, not Lauren's, using a master key he had somehow acquired. And in each apartment he had stolen 1 condom. Just 1 condom from each place. Nothing else. Just condoms. It was a bizarre confession, strange enough to be unsettling but not directly related to Lauren's murder. However, it gave police exactly what they needed. Probable cause. McDaniel had admitted to burglary. They could arrest him on those charges and hold him while they built their homicide case. Stephen McDaniel was taken into custody on burglary charges. He was denied bail. And now, finally, police had their opportunity to search his apartment. What they found inside would turn suspicion into certainty and reveal the depths of Stephen McDaniel's obsession with the woman next door. On the afternoon of Friday, July 1st, 2011, while Stephen McDaniel sat in a holding cell at the Bibb County Jail charged with burglary, a team of Macon police detectives and forensic specialists descended on his apartment at Barristers Hall. They obtained a warrant. McDaniel had initially refused consent. But now that he was under arrest for the burglary charge, he'd admitted to investigators had legal grounds to search for evidence related to those crimes and anything else they happened to find. Well, that would be admissible too. The door to Stephen McDaniel's apartment opened, and the investigators stepped inside. What they saw was disturbing, even before they started processing evidence. The apartment was sparse, dark, strange. The windows that Lauren's mother Karen had noticed years earlier were still always drawn, blocking out any natural light. There was a computer, multiple storage devices, cameras, piles of clothes, and random items scattered about. It had the air of a place where someone spent an enormous amount of time alone, in the dark, consumed by whatever was on those screens. As the team began their methodical search, the discoveries came quickly. First, they found the master key McDaniel had mentioned, the one he claimed he'd used years ago to steal condoms from other apartments. It was a key that could open any door in the Barristers Hall complex, including Lauren's. Then they found a second key. This one wasn't a master. It was a duplicate specifically cut for Lauren Giddings' apartment. Investigators would later theorize that McDaniel had used the master key to enter Lauren's apartment when she wasn't home, probably early in his time living there, and had made an impression of her key so he could come and go as he pleased. This revelation was chilling. It meant that for possibly years, Stephen McDaniel had been able to enter Lauren's apartment whenever he wanted, to walk through her home, to touch her belongings, to watch her sleep. Lauren had mentioned to friends, to her boyfriend David, that she thought items had been moved in her apartment, that she felt like someone had been inside when she wasn't there. She had even mentioned in that final email to David that she thought someone had tried to break in recently. She wasn't imagining it. Stephen McDaniel had been inside, multiple times, and she never knew. As the search continued, investigators found an empty hacksaw package. The brand was Stanley. The packaging was there in McDaniel's bathroom, propped behind a jug of bleach, but the hacksaw itself missing. Detectives immediately began searching the complex grounds. And in a maintenance room near the building they found it, a Stanley hacksaw. When they tested it they found microscopic tissue and blood. Lauren Giddings' DNA was on that blade. But perhaps the most damning evidence came from McDaniel's electronic devices, his computer, his external hard drives, his cameras. When forensic specialists began analyzing the digital contents, they uncovered a portrait of a deeply disturbed individual consumed by a dark obsession. There was violent pornography. There was illegal content involving minors, hundreds of images of child sexual exploitation material. This alone would lead to additional charges. And then there was the footage of Lauren. Stephen McDaniel had set up cameras and recording devices pointed at Lauren's apartment. Through gaps in curtains, through windows, he had been secretly filming her for an extended period. One video in particular captured footage from the night of June 25, 2011, the night Lauren was murdered. The video showed McDaniel in the darkness, recording through Lauren's window as she moved about inside her apartment, unaware she was being watched. This was his ritual. His obsession. He had been surveilling her, documenting her movements, learning her patterns. Investigators also found women's underwear in McDaniel's possession. That was later confirmed through DNA testing to belong to Lauren. He had stolen them from her apartment during one of his unauthorized entries. The digital evidence revealed something else. Something that would later be disclosed by prosecutors, but that still sends chills down the spine of anyone who hears it. Stephen McDaniel had discussed with his roommate, before Lauren's murder, about how he would go about the perfect murder. This wasn't a crime of passion. This wasn't a sudden loss of control. This was something McDaniel had fantasized about, planned for, thought through in disturbing detail. Then came another revelation. Surveillance footage from a Walmart store showed Stephen McDaniel on June 23, 2011, 3 days before Lauren's murder. Security cameras captured him walking through the aisles, looking at boat anchors, and buying rope, and a pair of rain ponchos. Boat anchors. Rope. These items suggested McDaniel had been planning to weigh down Lauren's body parts and dispose of them in water. The rain ponchos would have been to keep himself clean during the dismemberment. Everything was premeditated. Everything was planned. This was the blueprint for what Stephen McDaniel had actually called the perfect murder. For the investigators processing this evidence, the picture was now crystal clear. Stephen McDaniel had lived next door to Lauren Giddings for nearly 3 years. He had developed an obsessive fixation on her. He had obtained keys to her apartment and entered multiple times without her knowledge. He had filmed her secretly. He had stolen her underwear. He had discussed murdering someone and getting away with it. And when Lauren was preparing to leave Macon, to move to Atlanta and start her life with David, McDaniel couldn't let her go. In his twisted mind, if he couldn't have her, no one would. On July 2, 2011, just 2 days after Lauren's torso was found, prosecutors filed murder charges against Stephen McDaniel. The burglary charges that had been holding him were now joined by a charge of malice murder in the death of Lauren Teresa Giddings. The arrest shocked the Mercer Law School community. Students who had graduated alongside McDaniel couldn't believe it. He was weird, sure, awkward, socially inept, but a murderer, a monster. Lauren's family was devastated all over again, learning the details of what McDaniel had done, how he had violated Lauren's privacy long before he took her life, was almost unbearable. Karen Giddings would later say, "Some of us have speculated that if he's the one who did it, was because she was the only one who was really nice to him. Maybe he had some psycho love affair with her, and she was getting ready to leave, and he couldn't let her go." For Bill and Karen Giddings, for Caitlin and Sarah, the nightmare had taken on new dimensions. They couldn't even bury Lauren properly. They only had her torso. The rest of her, the 6 other pieces of their beloved daughter and sister, were still missing. On Saturday, August 6, 2011, family and friends gathered for a funeral service at St. Mary of the Mills Church in Maryland, where Lauren had attended school as a child. Hundreds came to pay their respects. Lauren's cremated remains, what little they had of her, were interred. "Our faith believes that her spirit is who she is," Karen told reporters. "We're trying to hold on to that, and it's really being tested now." Despite extensive searches of waterways, wooded areas, and landfills around Macon, Lauren's head, arms, and legs have never been recovered. To this day, more than a decade later, those parts of Lauren Giddings remain missing. Stephen McDaniel has never revealed what he did with them. In the weeks and months following Stephen McDaniel's arrest on murder charges, the Macon Police Department, the Bibb County District Attorney's Office, and forensic specialists from across Georgia worked together to build an airtight case. District Attorney Greg Winters knew this case would attract national attention. The brutality of the crime, the victim's background as a promising law graduate, the defendant status as her classmate and neighbor, All of it made this a high-profile prosecution. Winters wanted to make sure every piece of evidence was documented, analyzed, and preserved according to the strictest standards. Detective David Patterson, who had conducted that legendary interrogation of McDaniel, continued to dig deeper into the suspect's background. What emerged was a portrait of someone who had been deeply troubled for years but had managed to hide it behind a facade of awkwardness and social ineptitude. McDaniel had lived a largely isolated existence during his time at Mercer. He had a roommate at various points, but they weren't close. McDaniel spent most of his time alone in his apartment, windows drawn, engaging with his computer and his obsessions. When investigators interviewed other residents of Barristers Hall, several came forward with unsettling information. Some mentioned that items had gone missing from their apartments over the years, small things, personal things. They had never reported it, because they couldn't be sure anything had actually been stolen. But now, knowing that McDaniel had a master key and had admitted to entering apartments, the pieces fell into place. One resident mentioned that her underwear had disappeared from her laundry. Another said personal photographs were missing. These were violations of privacy that had gone unnoticed or unreported, but they established a pattern. Stephen McDaniel had been entering his neighbors' homes for years, taking trophies, feeding his compulsions. The forensic analysis of McDaniel's digital devices revealed thousands of files, hundreds of hours of video, and photographic material. Much of it was illegal content that would lead to additional charges. But mixed in with all of that was an extensive record of McDaniel's surveillance of Lauren Giddings. He had been watching her, recording her, documenting her daily routines. When she left for class, when she returned home, when her lights went on and off at night. It was systematic, obsessive, the behavior of someone building up to something. The hacksaw evidence was particularly damning. Investigators traced the purchase to a hardware store where surveillance footage showed McDaniel buying that specific Stanley brand hacksaw. The empty packaging in his bathroom, the saw itself found in the maintenance room with Lauren's DNA on it, create an unbreakable chain of evidence. The luminol testing in Lauren's bathroom had revealed a massive cleanup effort. Blood spatter patterns, even after cleaning, told forensic specialists what had happened there. The dismemberment had taken hours. It was methodical, careful. McDaniel had tried to erase every trace, but modern forensic science made that impossible. As the case moved through the legal system, McDaniel was held without bond at the Bibb County Jail. His attorney, Floyd Buford, initially maintained his client's innocence. McDaniel pleaded not guilty to all charges when he was first arraigned. But behind the scenes, prosecutors were preparing a devastating case. They had physical evidence, digital evidence, surveillance footage, DNA witness testimony, all of it pointing inexorably towards Stephen McDaniel's guilt. And they were considering seeking the death penalty. Georgia is a death penalty state, and the aggravating factors in this case, the premeditation, the brutality, the dismemberment, made it a potential capital case. District Attorney Greg Winters announced that his office would pursue the death penalty against McDaniel. This decision weighed heavily on Lauren's family. Lauren herself had been opposed to capital punishment. It was one of her deeply held beliefs, rooted in her Catholic faith and her commitment to justice reform. She wanted to be a public defender precisely because she believed everyone deserved a vigorous defense and fair treatment under the law. Karen and Bill Giddings found themselves in an impossible position. They wanted justice for their daughter. They wanted McDaniel to be held accountable for what he had done, but they also wanted to honor Lauren's beliefs and values. As the case proceeded toward trial, scheduled for some time in 2014, both sides knew that a trial would be lengthy, expensive, and emotionally devastating for everyone involved. The evidence against McDaniel was overwhelming, but a trial meant reliving every horrific detail, in public, in front of cameras, with the world watching. McDaniel's defense team faced an uphill battle. The evidence was simply too strong, but they had one potential avenue. They could try to negotiate a plea deal that would spare their client the death penalty in exchange for a full confession and a life sentence. For the prosecution, a plea deal had its own appeal. It would spare Lauren's family the trauma of a trial. It would guarantee a conviction and ensure McDaniel would never walk free. And it might, just might, result in McDaniel revealing what he had done with the rest of Lauren's body. In 2013, as the trial date approached, negotiations began in earnest. McDaniel's attorneys argued that despite the heinous nature of the crime, their client's youth, his lack of a prior criminal record, and the fact that Lauren herself opposed the death penalty should weigh in favor of a life sentence. Prosecutors countered that the premeditation, the sexual component suggested by the stolen underwear, surveillance, and the unimaginable brutality of the dismemberment all demanded the ultimate punishment. There was another complicating factor. Lauren's family had filed a wrongful death lawsuit against McDaniel. This civil action, while separate from the criminal case, created additional legal entanglements. For a plea deal to move forward, The family would need to agree to drop that lawsuit. It was an agonizing decision for the Giddings family. Drop the lawsuit. Except that they would never fully know what happened to all of Lauren's remains. Watch the man who murdered their daughter avoid the death penalty. In exchange, they would be spared the ordeal of a trial, and they would have the certainty of a confession. After much discussion, much prayer, much soul-searching, the family made their decision. They would accept a plea deal if Stephen McDaniel provided a full confession and agreed to life in prison without the possibility of parole for 30 years. Early 2014, after nearly 3 years in custody, Stephen Mark McDaniel was ready to confess. The evidence against him was simply insurmountable. The hacksaw with Lauren's DNA, the keys to her apartment, the surveillance videos, the stolen underwear, the digital record of his obsession, the Walmart surveillance showing him buying rope and ponchos days before the murder. Every piece fit together like a grotesque puzzle, and there was no way McDaniel could explain it away. His attorneys had made it clear, if this case went to trial, the death penalty was virtually guaranteed. His only chance at avoiding execution was to confess, to tell the truth about what he had done, and to accept responsibility. The Bibb County District Attorney's Office drafted a plea agreement. Stephen McDaniel would plead guilty to malice murder in the death of Lauren Teresa Giddings. In exchange, he would be sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 30 years. That meant McDaniel, who was 28 years old at the time of the plea, would not be eligible for parole until 2041 when he would be 55 years old. As part of the agreement, all remaining burglary charges and child exploitation charges would be dismissed, and critically, McDaniel would have to provide a detailed written confession explaining exactly what he had done and why. On April 21, 2014, Stephen McDaniel appeared in Bibb County Superior Court. The courtroom was packed. Lauren's family was there, her friends from Mercer Law School, members of the media, law enforcement officials who had worked the case. Everyone wanted to hear McDaniel finally admit what he had done. Judge Howard Z. Sims presided over the hearing. McDaniel, dressed in an orange jail jumpsuit, stood before the judge and formally entered his plea. Guilty to malice murder. Then the confession was read aloud. In his own words, Stephen McDaniel described the events of June 25 and 26, 2011, and what he revealed was every bit as chilling as investigators had suspected. McDaniel stated that he had used the master key he possessed to enter Lauren's apartment in the early morning hours. This was not the first time he had entered. He admitted he had been inside her apartment multiple times without her knowledge, using the duplicate key he had made. On this particular night, he entered while Lauren was asleep in her bedroom. His intention, he wrote, was to watch her as she slept. This was something he had done before. He would stand in the darkness of her apartment, in her bedroom doorway, and simply observe her sleeping form. It was, in his twisted mind, a way of being close to her, of possessing her, in some way. But on this night, something went wrong. Lauren woke up. She saw him standing there in her bedroom. She recognized him immediately. Her neighbor. Her classmate. Someone she had always been kind to. We can only imagine the terror Lauren felt in that moment. The confusion. The betrayal. Here was someone she had tried to befriend, someone she had encouraged and included, standing in her bedroom in the middle of the night like a nightmare come to life. According to McDaniel's confession, when Lauren woke and recognized him, he panicked. He couldn't let her scream. He couldn't let her call for help. He couldn't let her tell anyone what he had been doing. So he killed her. McDaniel admitted that he strangled Lauren Giddings to death with his bare hands. He wrote that he placed his hands around her throat and squeezed until she stopped struggling, until she stopped breathing, until she was dead. Even in his confession, McDaniel struggled to articulate why. "It is difficult for me to explain why I killed Lauren," he wrote. He claimed it was a panic response, that he hadn't planned to kill her that night. But investigators knew better. The hacksaw he had purchased days earlier, the rope and ponchos from Walmart, the discussion about the perfect murder. This was a man who had been preparing. After killing Lauren, McDaniel's confession described what can only be called a calculated cleanup operation. He dragged her body to the bathroom. Using the hacksaw he had purchased and hidden in the maintenance room, he spent hours dismembering her corpse. He removed her head, her arms, her legs, 7 pieces total. He cleaned the bathtub meticulously, scrubbing away blood, trying to remove all evidence of what he had done there. He wrapped Lauren's torso in plastic bags and placed it in the trash bin just outside, beneath the balcony they shared. As for the other 6 pieces, McDaniel provided only vague details. He claimed he disposed of them separately but refused to specify exactly where or how. To this day, despite extensive searches, those remains have never been found. After completing the dismemberment and cleanup, McDaniel returned to his own apartment as if nothing had happened. Over the next several days, he maintained this facade. He spoke with Lauren's friends who were starting to worry. He expressed concern about her disappearance. He even gave that infamous television interview. The one where he appeared to learn about the torso's discovery on camera. All of it was an act. A performance. An attempt to deflect suspicion. When McDaniel's confession was read in court, there were gasps from the gallery. Several of Lauren's friends were crying. Karen Giddings sat stone-faced, holding her husband's hand. This was the moment they had been waiting for, the confirmation of what they already knew, but hearing the details was almost unbearable. Judge Sims asked McDaniel directly if the confession was true, if he had written it freely, if he understood he was admitting to murdering Lauren Giddings. McDaniel, speaking in that same halting manner he had displayed during his interrogation, said yes. The judge then turned to the issue of the plea agreement and the sentence. Before imposing sentence, the court allowed victim impact statements. Lauren's boyfriend, David Van Diver, the King and Spalding attorney who had been planning a future with her, spoke about the woman he loved. He described her laugh, her kindness, her passion for justice. He spoke of wedding plans that would never come to be, of children they would never have, of a life stolen by the man standing before the court. Friends from Mercer Law School described Lauren's generosity, her leadership in the Federalist Society, her commitment to becoming a public defender. They spoke of the loss the legal profession had suffered when Lauren was murdered, the clients she would never represent, the justice she would never pursue. And then Karen Giddings stood to speak. This mother, who had raised Lauren from birth, who had toured college campuses with her, who had celebrated her graduation from law school just weeks before her death, Karen spoke directly to McDaniel. "You are the devil," she said, her voice shaking with rage and grief. "What you did to our daughter, to our sister, to our friend, can never be forgiven. You took her from us in the most horrible way imaginable." She described the torture of not knowing where all of Lauren's body was, of having only partial remains to bury. She spoke of nightmares and sleepless nights and the ongoing agony of living with this loss. "You deserve death," Karen said. But Lauren believed in mercy. She believed everyone deserved a chance at redemption. "So we are accepting this plea. Not because you deserve mercy, but because that's what Lauren would have wanted. But make no mistake, you will spend the rest of your life in prison. And when you die, you will answer to God for what you did." The courtroom was silent, except for the sound of quiet weeping. Judge Sims then imposed the agreed-upon sentence. Life in prison with the possibility of parole after 30 years. Stephen Mark McDaniel would be transferred to the Georgia Department of Corrections to begin serving his sentence immediately. As he was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs, McDaniel never looked at Lauren's family, never offered an apology beyond what was in his written statement. He simply shuffled out, head down, back to a life behind bars. The journey from arrest to confession had taken nearly 3 years, but for the Macon law enforcement officials who worked the Lauren Giddings case, the guilty plea represented the culmination of thousands of hours of painstaking investigative work. Chief Mike Burns, who had been there that terrible Thursday morning when Lauren's torso was discovered, who had sat with her father and told him the unspeakable truth, felt a measure of relief when the plea was entered. "No case brings complete closure," he would later say. "But knowing he'll spend his life in prison, that brings some peace." Detective David Patterson, who had conducted that marathon interrogation of McDaniel, who had patiently extracted the burglary confession that allowed them to arrest him in the first place, reflected on the case with the perspective of a veteran investigator. "He tried to commit the perfect murder," Patterson said. "But there's no such thing. You always leave evidence. You always make mistakes." McDaniel's mistakes had been numerous. The hacksaw packaging in his apartment, the master key and Lauren's duplicate key, the digital record of his surveillance, the Walmart footage, the stolen underwear with Lauren's DNA. Any one of these pieces of evidence might have been explained away, but together, they formed an unbreakable chain linking Stephen McDaniel to Lauren Giddings' murder. The community reaction to McDaniel's guilty plea was one of shock mixed with vindication. Students and faculty at Mercer Law School had suspected him from the beginning, but hearing him actually confess, hearing him admit in his own words what he had done, was still stunning. For the residents of Barristers Hall, many of whom had been living there when the murder occurred, the confession answered questions but raised new ones. How many times had McDaniel entered their apartments over the years? What had he done while inside? What had he taken? The thought that he had possessed a master key and had been moving through the complex like a ghost was deeply unsettling. Several residents came forward after the plea to describe experiences they had dismissed at the time, feeling like they were being watched, finding items moved or missing, hearing strange noises in the night. All of it took on new significance knowing what they knew now. The Maryland community, where Lauren had grown up, Laurel and the surrounding area, also reacted to the news of McDaniel's confession. At St. Mary of the Mills, the Catholic school where Lauren had learned the values of compassion and charity that defined her short life. Teachers and former classmates gathered to remember her. One teacher who had known Lauren as a child told reporters, "She always saw the best in people. Even as a little girl, she would befriend the kids others ignored." It's heartbreaking that the very quality that made her so special, her kindness, may have made her vulnerable to someone who couldn't appreciate it. Lauren's two best friends from childhood, Lori Supsick and Katie O'Hare, both struggled with guilt in the aftermath of the murder. Katie had been the first to realize something was wrong when Lauren didn't respond to that text about eye makeup. Lori had officially reported her missing. Both women wondered in the agonizing way survivors do if they could have done something differently, something that might have saved their friend. "We've talked about it so many times," Supsick said. "The what-ifs. What if we had called sooner? What if we'd driven down to Macon immediately?" But the truth is, by the time we started worrying, Lauren was already gone. There was nothing we could have done. The legal community in Georgia also took note of the case. Here were two recent law school graduates, both of whom had studied the same cases, learned the same principles, walked the same holes. One was planning to defend the accused. The other became a murderer. The Mercer Law faculty held a memorial service for Lauren after the guilty plea, a chance for the community to say a final goodbye. Her classmates spoke of her leadership, her warmth, her dedication to public service. The dean of the law school announced the creation of a scholarship in Lauren's name to be awarded annually to a student interested in public defense work. Lauren Giddings represented the best of what we hope our graduates will become, the dean said. Intelligent, passionate, committed to justice. She will never practice law, but her legacy will continue through the students who carry forward her vision. For David Van Diver, Lauren's boyfriend, the guilty plea brought a measure of finality but little comfort. He had been in California when Lauren sent that final email, the one where she mentioned thinking someone had tried to break into her apartment. He had been 700 miles away when she needed him most. Van Diver told reporters that he would always wonder what might have happened if he had been there that weekend, if he had insisted Lauren stay with him in Atlanta while studying for the bar, if he had taken her concerns about the break-in more seriously. "You can't change the past," he said. "But you also can't stop thinking about it." The arrest, the investigation, the confession, all of it demonstrated the importance of thorough, methodical police work combined with modern forensic science. This case, as horrible as it was, became a teaching moment for law enforcement agencies across the country. You follow the evidence. You document everything. You don't give up. And you remember that monsters don't always look like monsters. Sometimes they look like the awkward guy next door who throws darts alone in a corner. Sometimes they're the quiet classmate who never smiles. Sometimes they're the person the victim tried hardest to befriend. While there was no trial in the traditional sense, the plea hearing on April 21, 2014 functioned as a day of reckoning for Stephen McDaniel. The courtroom proceeding, though shorter than a trial would have been, still provided a forum for the full scope of McDaniel's crimes to be laid bare before the public. The prosecution, led by District Attorney Greg Winters and his team, had prepared extensive materials for what they expected would be a death penalty trial. When the plea deal was reached, many of these materials were submitted to the court as part of the record, ensuring that the public and the legal system had a complete picture of what Stephen McDaniel had done. The forensic evidence presented to the court painted a disturbing picture of premeditation and obsession. The surveillance videos of Lauren, some dating back months or even years before her death, showed McDaniel's fixation intensifying over time. His digital activity revealed endless searches related to murder, disposal of bodies, avoiding detection. One particularly chilling piece of evidence was a conversation McDaniel had had with a roommate about the perfect murder. In this conversation, which the roommate reported to police after McDaniel's arrest, McDaniel had discussed how someone could kill another person and get away with it. He talked about dismemberment as a way to confuse identification. He mentioned disposing of body parts in multiple locations to hinder investigation. At the time, the roommate had thought it was just weird hypothetical talk, the kind of dark conversation law students sometimes had after studying too many criminal cases. But in retrospect, it was clearly more than that. It was a blueprint. It was Stephen McDaniel working through his plan. The medical examiner's testimony, provided via affidavit since there was no trial, detailed the cause of death. Strangulation by manual compression of the neck. Lauren had been choked to death by hand, a method that required sustained pressure for several minutes. This was not a quick death. This was not an accident. This was murder in its most intimate, personal form. The dismemberment, according to forensic analysis, had been performed with a level of care that suggested McDaniel was following a plan. The cuts were deliberate, methodical. He had taken his time. The bathroom cleanup had been extensive, suggesting he knew he needed to eliminate evidence. The prosecution's theory, supported by all the evidence, was that McDaniel had been planning to kill Lauren for some time. The purchase of the hacksaw days before the murder, the rope and ponchos from Walmart, the discussions about perfect murder, all of it pointed to premeditation. What likely precipitated the timing was Lauren's impending departure from Barristers Hall. Her lease was up on July 1st. She was planning to move to Atlanta. For Stephen McDaniel, who had been obsessed with her for years, who had been secretly entering her apartment and watching her sleep, the thought of her leaving was unbearable. In his twisted logic, if he couldn't have her, if he couldn't continue his obsessive surveillance, then no one would have her. And so he entered her apartment one last time. And when she woke and saw him, he made his decision. The defense, led by attorney Floyd Buford, had little to work with. The evidence was overwhelming. Their strategy in negotiating the plea deal had been to emphasize McDaniel's age, his lack of prior violent criminal history, and his willingness to confess as mitigating factors. Buford argued that while McDaniel's crime was heinous, executing him would serve no purpose beyond vengeance. Life in prison would protect society while honoring Lauren's own opposition to the death penalty. It was a delicate argument, trying to invoke the victim's values to spare her killer's life. Judge Howard Z. Sims, in accepting the plea agreement, acknowledged the difficulty of the decision facing Lauren's family. No sentence can bring Lauren Giddings back, the judge said. No punishment can undo the horror of what was done to her, but the law provides certain options, and the state, in consultation with the victim's family, has determined that a life sentence is appropriate in this case. The judge went on to address McDaniel directly. Mr. McDaniel, you will spend every day for the rest of your natural life thinking about what you did. You will wake up in a cell, eat in a cell, live in a cell. You will be an old man, if you live long enough, before you even have the possibility of walking free. And even then, the parole board will know what you did, will have read the details of your crime, and I suspect you will never leave prison. The judge's prediction has proven accurate. Stephen McDaniel was transferred to Georgia Diagnostic and Classification Prison in Jackson, Georgia, to begin serving his sentence. In the years since his conviction, he has been moved through several facilities within the Georgia prison system. Prison records show McDaniel has been disciplined multiple times for infraction, including possession of contraband and unauthorized communications. He has not been a model prisoner. Reports suggest he has struggled to adapt to prison life, which is hardly surprising for someone who spent years living in isolation, consumed by his obsessions. McDaniel has also filed multiple appeals and post-conviction motions, all of which have been denied. He has attempted to argue that his guilty plea was not truly voluntary, that his attorneys provided ineffective assistance, that the evidence against him was improperly obtained. None of these arguments have succeeded. In 2018, McDaniel filed a habeas corpus petition claiming his former attorneys had not adequately represented him and that he should be granted a new trial. He actually called his former attorneys to testify, questioning them about their defense strategy. The court found his claims without merit and denied the petition. Legal experts following the case have universally agreed that McDaniel's appeals are meritless and that his life sentence will stand. His next opportunity for parole consideration will be in 2041. He will be 55 years old. Given the nature of his crime and his confession, it is virtually certain that parole will be denied. For all practical purposes, Stephen Mark McDaniel will die in prison. And that reality, that certainty, has provided some measure of comfort to Lauren's family and friends. The courtroom proceedings, though brief compared to what a full trial would have been, served an important function. They provided an official, public accounting of what Stephen McDaniel had done. They gave Lauren's family and friends a chance to confront him, to tell him how his actions had devastated so many lives. And they ensured that the record would be clear. Stephen McDaniel murdered Lauren Giddings. He confessed. He was sentenced. Justice, imperfect as it always is, was served. The words justice served can feel hollow when you're talking about a case like Lauren Giddings' murder. How can there be justice when a 27-year-old woman with her entire future ahead of her is dead? How can there be justice when her body was cut into pieces when 6 of those pieces have never been found, when her family will never have all of her to bury? But within the confines of what the legal system can provide, Lauren's case represents a successful investigation and prosecution. Stephen McDaniel was caught, arrested, prosecuted, and sentenced to life in prison. He confessed to his crime. He will never walk free. For Lauren's family, the plea deal brought a complicated mix of emotions: relief that they wouldn't have to endure trial, satisfaction that McDaniel had confessed and would spend his life in prison, but also frustration that he would avoid the death penalty and heartbreak that he never fully revealed what he did with all of Lauren's remains. Karen Giddings, in interviews after the plea hearing, spoke about the ongoing struggle to find peace. People ask me if I have closure, she said. I don't think I'll ever have closure. I don't have all of my daughter. I don't know where all of her is. But I know the person who killed her is in prison and he's not coming out. That has to be enough. Bill Giddings has been more vocal about the death penalty question. While respecting Lauren's beliefs and supporting his wife's decision to accept the plea deal, Bill has said he personally would have preferred to see McDaniel executed. What he did to Lauren, the way he violated her even before he killed her, the way he cut her up and threw her away like trash, Bill said. I don't think life in prison is enough, but it's what we have. Lauren's sisters, Caitlin and Sarah, have both struggled with the trauma of losing their big sister in such a horrific way. Caitlin, who had just gotten married weeks before Lauren's murder, has spoken about how the joy of her wedding will always be intertwined with the horror that came after. Lauren was at my wedding, Caitlin recalled. She was so happy for me. She sent me honeymoon photos, and when I didn't hear back from her, that's when I knew something was wrong. I'll never forget that feeling, and I'll never forget that the last time I saw my sister alive was at my wedding. And then 2 weeks later she was gone. Sarah, who was just 18 when Lauren was murdered, lost her big sister at a crucial time in her own life. Lauren had been a mentor to her, a guide, someone she looked up to and aspired to be like. Sarah has said that she thinks about Lauren every day, wondering what advice she would give, what she would say about Sarah's choices in her life. The victim impact statements read, at McDaniel's plea hearing were not just formal legal requirements. They were raw, emotional expressions of grief from people whose lives had been shattered. And they stand as a permanent part of the court record, a reminder that behind every crime statistic is a real person, a real family, real suffering. One of Lauren's law school professors attended the hearing and later wrote an essay about the experience. He described Lauren as one of the brightest students he'd ever taught, someone who asked probing questions and challenged conventional thinking. She would have been an excellent attorney, he wrote. She would have fought for people who had no one else to fight for them. The loss to the legal profession is incalculable. The Mercer Law School community held a memorial service for Lauren several weeks after McDaniel's sentencing. Hundreds attended. Classmates shared stories of Lauren's kindness, her leadership in the Federalist Society, her commitment to public defense. They spoke of how she would befriend anyone, how she always tried to bring people together, how she saw the good in everyone, even in Stephen McDaniel. And that's the cruel irony of this case. The very quality that made Lauren special, her compassionate nature, her willingness to be kind to the outcast and the awkward, that quality made her vulnerable to someone who exploited her kindness. Several speakers at the memorial addressed this directly. They urged the audience not to let Lauren's murder make them cynical, not to let it destroy their own capacity for compassion. Lauren would not want us to stop being kind, one friend said. She would want us to continue seeing the good in people, even knowing that sometimes, rarely, there are people who have no good in them. The scholarship established in Lauren's name at Mercer Law School has been awarded annually since 2014. Each recipient is a student interested in public defense work, continuing the mission Lauren never got to fulfill. The scholarship committee reads applications looking for students who demonstrate not just academic excellence but also compassion, leadership, and a commitment to justice for all. In that sense, Lauren's legacy continues. Every year, another student is inspired by her story and her values to pursue the work she would have done. Every year, another young attorney goes out into the world armed with the conviction that everyone, even the accused, even the despised, deserves a vigorous defense. For David Vandiver, Lauren's boyfriend, the guilty plea marked the end of one chapter but not the end of his grief. He has never spoken extensively in public about the loss, preferring to keep his mourning private. But friends say he was devastated by Lauren's murder and has struggled to move forward. In the years since Lauren's death, Vandiver has continued his practice at King and Spalding. Those who know him say he thinks of Lauren often, that he keeps a photo of her in his office, that he never forgets the future they were planning together. The final act of justice in Lauren's case came in the form of civil damages. While the wrongful death lawsuit was dropped as part of the plea agreement, the Giddings family did receive a small settlement from Barristers Hall related to security issues at the complex. The amount was not disclosed, but it was used to establish a trust in Lauren's name. More importantly, Barristers Hall implemented new security measures after Lauren's murder. All locks were changed. A policy was established to immediately investigate any reports of missing or moved items. Residents were educated about securing their apartments and reporting suspicious behavior. It's cold comfort, implementing security measures after someone has already been murdered. Perhaps it prevents the next tragedy. Perhaps the next awkward neighbor with a master key gets caught before he escalates. Perhaps the next Lauren Giddings is saved. That's what justice looks like. In the real world, not perfect, not complete, but something. Stephen McDaniel in prison for life, security improved. Lauren's legacy honored, a scholarship bearing her name. Memories preserved. It's not enough. It will never be enough, but it's what we have. The Lauren Giddings case resonates beyond the specifics of this particular murder for several important reasons. It stands as a stark reminder that danger can come from the most unexpected places, that monsters don't always look or act like monsters, and that even the most trusting, compassionate person can become a victim. In the decade plus since Lauren's murder, her case has been featured on numerous true crime television shows, podcasts, and documentaries. Dateline, NBC, 48 Hours, Investigation Discovery, all of them have covered the story. The infamous footage of Stephen McDaniel's on-camera reaction when he learned about the discovery of the torso has been viewed millions of times online and analyzed endlessly by body language experts and armchair detectives. The case has become a touchstone in discussions about stalking, surveillance, and personal safety, particularly for young women living alone or in apartment complexes with multiple residents. Security experts point to Lauren's case when making recommendations about changing locks, using door braces and window alarms, and being cautious about who has keys to your home. The revelation that McDaniel had a master key and had made a duplicate of Lauren's key has led to broader conversations about landlord security practices. Many complexes have since moved to electronic key fob systems where access can be tracked and revoked instantly. Traditional master key systems, which allow one key to open multiple locks, are increasingly seen as security vulnerabilities. The case also raises uncomfortable questions about social isolation and mental health, particularly among young men. Stephen McDaniel was clearly troubled long before he murdered Lauren. His social awkwardness, his isolation, his inability to form normal relationships, all of these were warning signs. But warning signs of what, exactly? And who should have intervened? How? These are questions without easy answers. We live in a society that values privacy and individual liberty. We can't lock people up for being weird or awkward. We can't force people to get mental health treatment unless they're in imminent danger to themselves or others. And Stephen McDaniel, for all his strangeness, never gave anyone cause to believe he was dangerous until it was too late. Lauren's friends have said that if anyone had suggested McDaniel was capable of murder, they would have dismissed it as ridiculous. He was odd, yes. Socially inept, certainly. But a killer? Never. And Lauren herself, kind-hearted Lauren who saw good in everyone, would have been the first to defend him. The case has also sparked conversations within the legal community about collegiality and boundaries. Lauren and McDaniel were classmates for 3 years. They served together in the Federalist Society. They graduated together, yet they were never friends, never close, barely knew each other beyond surface interactions. Some Mercer Law School faculty have since implemented more robust mental health support and community building programs, trying to ensure no student falls through the cracks. No one becomes as isolated as Stephen McDaniel was. Whether these programs would have made a difference in McDaniel's case is impossible to say. But they might help someone else. For true crime enthusiasts and criminal justice professionals, the Lauren Giddings case is studied for its investigative techniques. The use of luminol to find clean blood, the digital forensics that revealed McDaniel's surveillance activities, the store surveillance that captured him buying the murder weapon, the patient interrogation that led to his burglary confession and subsequent arrest. Detective David Patterson's interrogation of McDaniel has become a case study in interviewing techniques. Patterson never raised his voice, never accused, never threatened. He simply sat across from McDaniel and let the silence work for him, and when McDaniel, unable to bear the tension, started talking, Patterson listened. And McDaniel confessed to the burglaries, giving police exactly the probable cause they needed to hold him and search his apartment. The case also demonstrates the importance of seemingly minor evidence. Stolen condoms. It sounds almost comical, doesn't it? But those stolen condoms, which McDaniel admitted to taking, were what allowed police to arrest him on burglary charges. And that arrest led to the search. And that search found the hacksaw packaging, the keys, the underwear, all the evidence that proved murder. In criminal investigations, you never know what small detail will crack the case. You follow every lead. You document everything. You let the evidence tell you the story. For the Macon Police Department and Chief Mike Burns, the Lauren Giddings case became a defining moment. It was the kind of case that makes headlines, that brings scrutiny and pressure, but it was also the kind of case where the investigation was done right, where the evidence was collected properly, where patience and thoroughness paid off. Chief Burns, who retired several years after the case concluded, has said that telling Bill Giddings about his daughter's dismemberment was one of the hardest moments of his career, but he also said that seeing Stephen McDaniel sentenced to life in prison was one of the most satisfying. The case has had a lasting impact on the Macon community as well. Lauren Giddings is not forgotten there. Anniversaries of her death are marked with memorials and remembrances. St. Joseph Catholic Church, where she attended Mass daily, holds a special service for her each year. The Mercer Law School hosts an annual lecture in Lauren's name, focusing on criminal justice reform and the importance of public defense. Speakers have included prominent defense attorneys, judges, and scholars, all addressing topics Lauren cared deeply about. In Maryland, in the community where Lauren grew up, her memory is similarly honored. St. Mary of the Mills School, where she attended from kindergarten through 8th grade, teaches her story to students as an example of kindness and compassion. They focus not on the horror of her death, but on the beauty of her life, the person she was, the values she held. Lauren's best friends, Lori Supsick and Katie O'Hare, have both spoken at events about losing her. They've participated in podcasts and documentaries, sharing their memories of their friend. They do this, they say, because they want people to know Lauren as more than a victim. She was a person, a friend, a daughter, a sister. She had dreams and plans and a future. And all of it was stolen by Stephen McDaniel. Perhaps the most important resonance of Lauren's case is this: it reminds us that cold cases, solved cases, every case represents real people, real families still waiting for answers, real communities seeking closure. And it reminds us that justice, while imperfect, matters. It matters that we investigate. It matters that we prosecute. It matters that we hold people accountable for the harm they caused. Stephen McDaniel tried to commit the perfect murder. He planned. He prepared. He executed his plan. And for a few days, it looked like he might actually get away with it. But he didn't. Because police did their jobs. Because forensic scientists did their jobs. Because detectives followed the evidence wherever it led. And now Stephen McDaniel sits in a Georgia prison cell, where he will remain for the rest of his natural life. That's not perfect justice. Lauren is still dead. Her family still suffers. But it's something. It's accountability. It's consequences. And for Lauren's family, for her friends, for everyone who loved her, that has to be enough. The story of Lauren Giddings is, at its core, a tragedy. A bright, compassionate young woman with her whole future ahead of her was murdered by someone she tried to befriend, someone she saw as harmless, someone she went out of her way to be kind to. It's a reminder that evil can wear a familiar face, that danger can live right next door, that the awkward classmate, the weird neighbor, the person others dismiss as harmless, can be hiding dark obsessions and violent intentions. But Lauren's story is also about more than her death. It's about the life she lived, the person she was, the values she held. Lauren believed in compassion, in seeing the good in people, in standing up for the vulnerable and the accused. She wanted to be a public defender, to give voice to those who had no voice. Those values, those beliefs, they didn't die with Lauren. They live on in the scholarship that bears her name, in the students who are inspired by her story, in the public defenders who continue the work she never got to do. Lauren's family has shown remarkable strength and grace in the years since her murder. They've honored her memory while also trying to heal from an unimaginable loss. They've accepted that they'll never have all of Lauren back. That's sick. Pieces of their daughter and sister will forever remain missing. But they've chosen to focus on the Lauren they remember, smiling, laughing, kind, compassionate, full of life. Karen and Bill Giddings still live in that house on 20 acres in Maryland, the house where Lauren grew up. Her room, friends say, is largely unchanged. Photos of her are throughout the house. She is remembered, celebrated, mourned. Caitlin and Sarah both grew up without their big sister, but they carry her with them. Caitlin named her first daughter after Lauren, ensuring her sister's name lives on in the next generation. Sarah pursued a career in social work, drawn to helping others in part because of Lauren's influence. The case of Lauren Giddings solved stands as a testament to thorough investigative work, to the power of forensic science, and to the importance of never giving up on seeking justice. It took just days to solve, but those were days filled with intensive work, careful evidence collection, and methodical analysis. Stephen McDaniel thought he had planned the perfect murder. But there is no such thing. He left evidence at every turn: the hacksaw, the keys, the digital surveillance, the stolen items. And when police found that evidence, they built an unbreakable case against him. Today, Stephen Mark McDaniel sits in a Georgia prison cell, and Lauren Teresa Giddings rests in peace, her memory honored by those who loved her. The arrest shocked the community, but it also brought a measure of closure, a sense that Lauren's killer would be held accountable. If there's a lesson to take from Lauren's story, beyond the obvious warnings about personal safety and security, it's this: don't let fear of evil destroy your capacity for good. Lauren's kindness, her compassion, her willingness to see the best in people, these were beautiful qualities. They shouldn't have made her vulnerable. Stephen McDaniel made her vulnerable. He chose to exploit her kindness. He chose to murder her. The fault lies entirely with him. So remember Lauren not as a victim, though she was one. Remember her as a person who tried to make the world better, who want to help people, who saw good even in those others had written off. And remember that this cold case solved represents countless others still waiting for answers. There are families out there right now, families like the Giddings family was. In June 2011, desperate for information about missing loved ones. There are cases sitting on detectives' desks, waiting for that one breakthrough, that one piece of evidence that will finally bring justice. No case is ever truly cold as long as people care, as long as investigators keep working, as long as technology advances and new techniques emerge. Lauren's case was solved within days, but the principles are the same. Follow the evidence. Document everything. Never give up. If you have any information about unsolved cases in your area, remember that your tip could be the one that brings someone home. It could be the detail that finally allows a family to bury their loved one with dignity. It could be the evidence that puts a killer behind bars. Lauren Giddings wanted to be a public defender because she believed in justice for all. She believed everyone deserved a voice. Everyone deserved representation. Everyone deserved compassion. She lived those values right up until the moment Stephen McDaniel took her life. This case reminds us that cold cases can be solved, that arrest shock communities can lead to healing, and that justice, though sometimes delayed and never perfect, is always worth pursuing. Lauren's killer sits in prison. Lauren's memory lives on. And somewhere tonight, investigators are working on another cold case, following another trail of evidence, seeking justice for another family. The work continues. The pursuit of justice never ends. Remember Lauren Teresa Giddings. Remember what she stood for. Remember that even in the darkest cases, even in the face of unimaginable evil, the pursuit of truth and justice matters. With that said, thanks for listening. And until next time, remember that every cold case represents someone who mattered. Someone who was loved, someone whose story deserves to be told.